wonder how many episodes we make before this whole thing is burned to the ground. What you're doing is you're causing problems in their family.
That's so not true.
And that's fucked up.
You told
and
Trisha this.
She doesn't
no
want any more of that.
excuses. It's like, who the fuck are you, bitch?
Hey, what? This is why you are such a dangerous person. You'll take something that somebody told you in confidence and you'll use it, you'll weaponize it against them.
In this situation, yes.
I just wanted to come out here and kind of address everything going on with the frenemies.
You are such a liar and you're such a manipulator, so do not act like you're innocent in any of this.
Every time Trisha makes a video, they're saying one thing, and then you watch back the podcast episode and they said another thing.
We'll see you I don't know what's the next episode, but hopefully next week it might be a little longer than that.
Frenemies. It's the podcast whose breakup just keeps on giving. As in, Trisha Paytas keeps posting hour-long videos to her channel where she incoherently rambles about bullshit, which in turn allows T channels to repeat what she says but in shorter videos and to give amazing analysis of the situation.
I don't know, guys. This whole situation is crazy, and I hope they just take everything offline because at the end of the day, this is a real family.
Truly riveting commentary. It is crazy by some metrics. But just how crazy is it? More importantly, how crazy is Trisha Paytas? The answer to that question is extremely. And by that, I mean she has somehow fooled millions of people into relating to her and sympathizing with her, when every moment of her online career has been a train wreck. 10 years of straight cancer, and Ethan Klein is involved too. Yeah, he's here. A guy who I also love and respect. In a nutshell, I kind of hate both of these people. I'm betting a lot of you folks in the audience do too, for a variety of reasons. So instead of picking sides, how about with this one we sit back, relax, grab some popcorn, and watch the trash fire unfold. Let's get into it. Where we last left off with Ethan Klein, things weren't going great. While from 2016 to 2018, he was one of the premier faces of YouTube, fighting for the community and making consistently entertaining videos. As of 2020, his former fanbase was losing favor with him, following the Ethan vs. Keemstar saga. Videos by people like Gokanaru, as well as the collaborative series by myself and Nick Diorio, played a big part in this as well. These were huge, event-style uploads, and the drama at the time reached some pretty stellar heights.
Any other easy target on YouTube did shit like this, nobody would have a problem calling them out, and rightfully so. It's blatant hypocrisy. But because Ethan Klein is just such a great guy, he gets a free pass.
Easily the biggest story on the platform at the time, and we had a lot of legitimate gripes with him that I stand behind to this day. His general dishonesty, combined with things like platforming a degenerate doxer and flagger to make Keemstar and the commentary community look bad, made us all jump ship on H3H3.
I wanted desperately to go back to that time when Ethan was taking on the bad guys and saving the day. But as time goes on, and more of Ethan's character is revealed, it's become pretty obvious to me that, well, he never cared in the first place.
The community, which for years had championed and supported him, had lost faith in his stances and character. It was obvious at this point by the numbers. According to Ethan himself, he had lost 80% of his sponsors on the show due to what happened during the controversy with Keemstar. Did their audience just up and leave immediately? No, the H3 brand was still huge, so they managed to maintain some of their loyal listeners. However, that group of people was dwindling, as his fans grew more disenfranchised with him and his actions. From a monetary perspective, they were probably still doing fine. Hila's clothing brand has stayed popular for years, and their show was definitely breaking even, but it just wasn't what it was before. If I had to guess, it wasn't nearly as lucrative as it was 6 months prior. From episodes of the show at the time, you can kind of tell that it was weighing on Ethan in particular. What would Ethan do? Would he take up making Roblox Let's Plays? Maybe he would become a semi-ironic 3 a.m. channel, where he summoned the imposter.
No, we get a little goofy at night when we call each other names.
You know, I almost would have preferred this from him. Regardless, there needed to be a change in their formula. It was really sink or swim time for the brand. That change, to bring them back from nearing the grave, would end up being Trisha Paytas. Trisha is someone with more than a decade of industry history, both on YouTube and in celebrity culture. She's been friends with people like David Dobrik and Shane Dawson when they were at the top of their game. She always seems to be around more popular and famous people who actually do things. And yet, she's one of those people where you sort of have to wonder, why is this person famous? She doesn't have any discernible talents like being a great writer or editor or artist or musician. She's not particularly funny either.
100 layers of cum. My lip are so swollen.
She isn't a great commentator on the events of the day by any means, and wandering over to her channel will reveal something even more peculiar. Despite its massive catalog of uploads, it's hard to determine what her fans find endearing about her. The only thing to be learned from her videos is that they paint the image of an extremely dysfunctional person who has failed to sort out their own personal issues, instead opting to post her mental breakdowns and life events to the internet for all to see. The true revelation comes from the fact that Trisha is not wildly successful in spite of her personal shortcomings, but rather because of them. Her never-ending downward spiral has contributed to millions of views on her channel every month. Articles written about her, YouTube videos talking about her, podcast episodes discussing her. Like it or not, she's part of the pop culture ethos right now, and she is a big deal.
I make no money off AdSense. Why do you think I do Patreon and show my pussy? I make no money.
Well, monetized, and I'm going to tell you exactly how much money
No,
she
don't
made.
say how
She made $8,000 from that video.
Through the YouTube scene, Ethan and Trisha had become acquainted and eventually became friendly, although their initial personal relationship seemed to come down to a lot of disagreements rather than things that they had in common. Ethan had stated that he was looking for someone who had interesting chemistry with him and a big personality to do a show with the person who came to mind being Trisha. On paper, this does make sense. Whereas Ethan is cynical and seemingly in a perpetual state of misery, Trisha is loud and ditzy and emotional and kinda crazy. Whether you like the people here or not, the recipe for success is present, and I'd be lying if I said that I didn't watch the show.
Because with you, I know that like your relationships are very hot and cold.
Mm-hmm.
And so we've built this whole set and table.
While they did think it would be popular, hence the creation of the podcast, I don't think any of the people involved could have predicted just how big it would be. The first episode of Frenemies quickly outperformed their latest installment of the H3 podcast, as the concept was intriguing for viewers, and the banter was entertaining enough to hold them there for the full hour. They also put their hearts on a platter. Their embrace of topics which otherwise would go undiscussed made it appealing. You just don't get to see this stuff anywhere else.
We love Egypt. Why do you love Egypt so much?
I just found out it was real on your show on H3.
That's why I'm so upset that I can't lose. That you thought Egypt was a
I literally thought it
mythological
was
place.
fake. Like Cleopatra, I thought was fake. Like I thought everything was fake, and this is a whole new world to me. Shout out Egypt.
How are you real?
The entire thing was kind of a mess, but that was also what made it so special. Quickly, sponsors were attracted to the show as well. Companies that wanted a piece of the massive audience being built around the podcast. Thanks to Trisha, a new audience was being built on the H3 channel, and a bunch of the new fans from Frenemies were checking out their other shows, like Content Court, the H3 Podcast, and H3 After Dark. Amazingly, she had managed to revive the dying audience with some new life, bringing some of her own fans with her, as well as an all-new demographic to check them out. The rise and fall of Ethan Klein had turned into another rise. Of course, it wasn't without its rough waters. On episode 13, Trisha got into an argument with Ethan, and stormed out of the studio before the end of the episode.
She's such a fucking bitch.
She's not.
And you are too, and you're a fucking cuck.
You
have no
a
fucking
cock.
backbone.
All right, you should leave. We'll talk later. Yeah, you should get out.
I am going, but
Yeah.
we're not talking later. Fucking bitch, you too.
This was posted to the official channel, with Trisha quitting the podcast in the title. Despite the sensationalism, there is a realness to the autism that just makes it hard to look away. This episode in particular has more than 3.5 million views and 60,000 comments. People love to talk about this stuff. There's a conversation to be had. But ultimately, these interpersonal conflicts were worth enduring for Ethan, Hila, and Trisha, and anyone else involved, because it was all for the show.
But taking no accountability, no responsibility. You think everything's just an attack against you. Everyone's against Ethan. Like, oh my gosh, I'm always right. It's like, ugh, you and Jax don't serve each other, so.
Jax? Well, I can't believe you're going after Jax. He's such a sweet guy.
I love you.
All right, Trisha.
If it was just two friends sitting around and talking, it never would have become as big as it did. Even still, I think most people thought it would at least last longer than 8 months. You can probably see where I'm going with this. Let's investigate, boys and girls. And by investigate, I mean read tweets and watch podcast clips. Chop chop, Turkey Tom team. We've got some drama to talk about. Frenemies, episode 39. Talking about Gabby Hanna. During the episode, an argument breaks out between the hosts, mostly over Trisha's input on the show, as well as her pay.
Obviously, I don't want to get an argument over
really
like
need
your
to
most.
leave.
Okay, all right, we're done. Thank you guys.
Thank you.
If you've ever watched a Trisha Paytas video, you'll likely notice that she's not very concise. There's not a lot of, this is how I feel, and the reason is this. It's more of a incoherent ramble for an hour, where the point is buried in between a bunch of tangents and crying and insane shit. It's hard to sit through. So, I'll be doing my best here to summarize what happened. During the advice segment, Trisha said that she found that part of the podcast to be pointless and boring, and said that the podcast as a whole was lazy. That then turned into a conversation about how Ethan recycles content onto frenemies from his other shows, and doesn't bring a lot of great stuff to the podcast.
Okay, let's go
I
to
just
your
wanna
stupid.
make sure that everyone
I don't
got
like this
pizza.
segment. Just for the record, fan advice is a stupid segment. But we
Why?
can do it. I saw on this you had stuff from last H3. You just recycle H3 content on frenemies. It's not that great sometimes. A lot of it is, and I like appreciate all the work you do and stuff like that. But it's also like not that great. I don't get input on like people we hire, like all this stuff like that. I don't get.
People
I
we
don't.
hire. Why would I ask you about people I hire? I take 5% extra from the podcast revenue.
Mm-hmm.
And I take the highlights revenue, and everything else we split.
The major takeaway from the conversation would be that Trisha wants more input on the show, such as production, who they hire to be on the show, and the topics. This then morphed into a discussion about where the 5% cut of the show that Ethan takes for production goes, and how it is used. This made Trisha appear as though she wanted to be paid more. The end of this conversation had Trisha accusing Ethan of perhaps the most obnoxious buzzword ever.
Gaslighting.
You're gaslighting me! No, you're gaslighting me. You're gaslighting me! In a nutshell, Trisha wanted Frenemies to be its own independent production, instead of relying on the H3 brand and staff. Because of how heated it gets, the show ends and it all comes to a close. The episode was released to the members of the H3 podcast channel a day early, and Trisha then posted a video of rambling. The next few days were filled with a series of Twitter arguments, as well as 2 podcasts and 9 videos. This is hours of content. Fucking hours of mental breakdowns. My initial reaction to all of this was that Trisha is an ungrateful, annoying person who should shut up. Someone who has a really large platform and offered her a job that she cannot get anywhere else, right? She can't be on a podcast just like this anywhere else. She's really not going to get a deal as sweet as this one. But after putting a magnifying glass over this whole thing, there is a lot more to it than that, and I want to get into some of the details. Researching this video was actually a little difficult for a second. I was really confused as to why I couldn't find Trisha's Twitter. I thought maybe she had been suspended. Maybe she had blocked me or something. I quickly realized that I had blocked her a while back because she posted a picture of her asshole online. I could have gone my whole life without seeing Trisha Paytas' toilet paper cookie crumble asshole. And yet, here I am. I thought Nikocado was enough. I'm still suffering. Trisha made a follow-up video, clarifying her intentions for the podcast. She said it wasn't about the money, and her argument at the end of the day came down to her being a big part of the show. She thinks that she deserves more input. Trisha has star power that she brings there, and she's half of the entertainment, yet it's all done in Ethan's studio, with Ethan's staff, and her input on topics is minimal. Ethan says she doesn't do a ton of work for the show. This is true, but she seems willing to put in more time to it if given the opportunity. Her argument seems fair, right? And even after the release of the episode, which in my opinion should not have been released because it included a discussion about business, which is extremely unprofessional to talk about on the show. Not that professionalism has ever been their brand, but still, things were bad, but it appeared somewhat cordial. No one was really angry publicly, but things started to get worse when Ethan claimed that the podcast crew was getting hate from some fans who were taking Trisha Paytas' side. After a little back and forth, the topic of money came up again, and then Trisha leaked DMs. Nice. Any sense of decency between the two was thrown out the window with the release of the video One More Thing, which had a very mixed reception. I feel uncomfortable going into someone's house, but doesn't want to move to the actual studio office they bought. I don't care about the money, but continues to mostly talk about the money and continues to bring up money on the show, which is unprofessional. I wasn't upset, I was frustrated, even though these words are pretty much interchangeable. You literally use the term lazy regarding the production of the crew on air. It doesn't matter if you are normally nice or respectful. At this moment, you were not, and your apology should be simple. I'm sorry, I was upset with Ethan and tried to take digs at him, but inadvertently insulted you guys in the process. Really, you can't just talk shit about the podcast and your partner in the middle of a show because you start to feel angry and not expect them to be upset and stick up for themselves. At this point, Trisha's more loyal fans are still with her, but as we see from the comments, the majority of the Frenemies audience has turned on her. Ethan's response to her in a solo episode of the podcast would prove to be a turning of the tide, as he was able to clarify what he felt happened and give an explanation of how he felt about the entire thing. Using simple like to dislike democracy to gauge how the audience feels, we can see that Ethan definitely won the battle. Does that mean he's right? Not really, but in this case, he just came across as more level-headed and grappling with a tough situation, while Trisha is spurging the fuck out like a fish that just got hooked. She knows she's kind of fucked, and now she's just flailing around. But to end this business abruptly is a huge loss for both parties. As Ethan said, there are still 4,000 Frenemies hoodies that were planned to be sold, which are now in limbo. Beyond small stuff like that, Frenemies is one of the most popular podcasts in the world right now. While both of these people are millionaires, and Trisha described her earnings from the show as fun money in an episode, the relevancy is still a big deal here. The influence. Prior to the podcast, most people in Ethan's audience, and YouTube at large, saw Trisha as a narcissistic, crazy person. But as the show went on, she came to be more and more likable, and audiences were turned on to her personality. Just looking at the comments of some of the episodes reveals her change to favorability in the public eye. This year has to be Trisha's. She's been dropping horrible people and identifying her disorders or problems she had to cope with. She's engaged and now has a band that she is passionate about. Ethan is being honest and loyal to her as well. I really hope more positive things come to her life. I love this phase of life for Trish. She's happy with a man who is so caring and loving. She's cultivating a genuine, true friendship with Ethan. She's doing this podcast that lets the world see her in a much more real light, like pulling back the curtain. After following Trish and her struggles for years, I'm so happy to see that this might finally be the part of her life where she really blossoms. At this point, there was some sign of her salvaging what little she had left. She was even ready to throw in the towel for a moment and apologize. She was gonna walk away from it all. Question for the kids at home. From here, do you think it gets better or worse? I know, dumb question. It got worse. And during this conflict, the goodwill she had developed with a new audience was quickly thrown away. The two then had even more of a back and forth, and it was brought to a new level of shit. While Ethan seemingly tried to calm the conflict and put it to an end, likely to stop the hate that the crew of the show was getting, his counterpart didn't take it well, and decided to basically tell him to fuck off. Her follow-up move was to leak some messages claiming that Ethan was lying about where the money was going. But as many of the T channels talking about this situation have pointed out, she didn't really make much of a mark here. This is where things get really rough. Somehow, by an act of the Twitter demon possessing her, Trisha managed to tweet every minute for 2 hours. This isn't a joke or a meme. She tweeted every fucking minute for 2 hours. Truly amazing. This was all accompanied by 5 more videos called I'm Sorry, Ethan's Lies, Ethan's Lies Part 2, Ethan's Lies Part 3, and this needs to be said, 3 of which are more than 40 minutes long. Ha 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 ha. I watched these videos. I actually sat down and watched all of this content. The videos are all full of contradictions, like her being upset about her making little mishaps upsetting people when part of her initial argument was that Ethan should walk on eggshells around her to accompany her mental illness. She's upset that she didn't have more input on the show, while on the show she frequently said that she didn't want to be texted about it or know the topics beforehand. The more she tries to debunk any reason that Ethan has, she just twists the net further, and now she's stuck in it. However, that isn't all there is to the situation. With people like Ethan and Trisha, it's never that simple.
Ethan Klein and Trisha Paytas. Which one of these people is truly at fault for creating the animosity that led to the end of the Frenemies podcast? Was the podcast doomed the second Ethan's fat ass asked for another slice of pizza? Or was Trisha Paytas' inability to hold her composure during a simple conversation the last straw for this beloved podcast? Well, I don't think it's either of those things. In the past, Trisha Paytas decided to fully quit the Frenemies podcast right on the episode in the moment live by leaving the set, never intending to come back again. But with this third and last storm out, which this time resulted in permanently ending the show, ironically, I think this is the only time where Trisha didn't intend this to be the case when she did that storm out. The reason I think this is Trisha's willingness to record a new Frenemies vlog the next day after that podcast was recorded. The Rage Room vlog that Ethan uploaded shortly after Frenemies ending was initially planned to be recorded for the third Frenemies vlog, after they recorded episode 39 of the podcast. Due to the argument that took place, Ethan asked Trisha if she was still comfortable to do the vlog, to which she responded, "I'm down to do it, of course," only to receive a message from Ethan 3 hours later, telling Trisha that the recording was cancelled because the crew was upset about what she said on the last podcast. This right here is what caused the Frenemies podcast to end once and for all, as this message from Ethan right here caused so much miscommunication and misunderstanding, not only between Trisha and Ethan, but also the entire staff of Frenemies. Based on what I could gather from stuff both Ethan and Trisha have said, is that Trisha wanted the 5% extra Ethan gets from Frenemies towards production costs to be used to hire some new staff exclusively for Frenemies, as the current staff on Frenemies is just carryovers from other shows on H3 Productions. And rather than just being a guest on Ethan's production, she wanted to have some additional staff that was exclusive to Frenemies in order to feel like she could have some of her own staff that can help contribute to her vision of the show, instead of the staff being just there for Ethan. Since Ethan already has all the staff he needs for the podcast, he assumed that this request from Trisha meant that she wanted to replace the whole crew, firing the current staff. But in reality, Trisha just wanted to add extra staff. Anyways, Ethan ended up telling the crew that Trisha wanted them fired, but asked if they were still down to record the Rage Room vlog regardless, to which they responded by saying they felt awkward about it, but ultimately they would do their jobs if they needed to. Due to the uncomfortableness that arose from Ethan saying that Trisha essentially didn't want them to work for her, Ethan made the executive decision to cancel the Rage Room vlog. But when she told Trisha about this, his explanation to Trisha was that the crew was upset about what she said on the last episode of Frenemies, saying, and I quote, "You trashed them kinda badly," referring to the Q&A segment that Trisha criticized on the last podcast. Trisha, not even knowing that the idea was one of the crew members, and not intending to insult them, had a pretty visceral reaction that ended up in her deciding there and then to end the podcast with Ethan, because she didn't want to be a burden to the crew. But it turns out that the main person who set up the Q&A, an H3 employee that goes by the name of Sam, according to Ethan, wasn't even upset that Trisha disliked the segment, and was mainly upset by the fact that Trisha supposedly wanted her fired.
I don't think it really matters whose idea it was. The fact that Trisha was just going to sit there and trash their work was kind of unacceptable to me, because ultimately I have to create a safe work environment for my employees, and it's just kind of toxic to sit there and shit on their work. Whoever did it, it doesn't matter who did it. But I do want to say for the record that that's not what happened. Sam was not upset that she didn't like the work. If anyone was upset, it's because she said that she wanted to fire everybody and get a new staff.
So as you could tell, Ethan acting as a middleman between all of these parties all resulted in Trisha wanting to leave the show, which she ended up doing by uploading her video titled "Stepping Down from Frenemies," which came as a shock to Ethan, and thus the argument completely snowballed out of control. Mainly due to Trisha releasing 9 videos on the subject and over 300 tweets about Ethan, all stemming from this one miscommunication. I feel like if Trisha or Ethan made the executive decision to have an in-real-life meeting about this between them and the crew, instead of spamming out a bunch of 40-minute plus videos, I feel like this would never have gone to the point where Frenemies is permanently cancelled. And in my opinion, the perfect opportunity to have this type of meeting would have been the day after the argument happened, having them all meet up to talk about this either before or after filming the Rage Room vlog, as was already planned. It would have been the perfect opportunity. The whole point of a Rage Room is to let out steam. So if there's too much animosity to talk about the situation right away, you can let off steam at the Rage Room, then talk about it. Or if any animosity gets created from the initial meeting, you can let off steam at the Rage Room and talk about it again after. Complete missed opportunity there in my opinion, but hindsight is 20/20, so I can't blame Ethan too hard for making the decision to cancel the Rage Room vlog with Trisha specifically in the heat of the moment. As as Trisha isn't the easiest person to work with. If she was, I'm pretty sure this argument would have never happened, as she would have addressed her concerns with the staff to Ethan way before the 39th episode of their podcast. But that's just what I took away from the situation, from looking into what everybody has said. Over on my channel, Boblax, I try to gather all the information possible when it comes to feuds like this to see everybody's side, in order to hopefully show a more clear and accurate picture of what's going on without any bias. If you're interested in that type of content, I recommend you check it out. But for now, I hope you enjoy listening to the rest of this video by the most based commentator on the website, Turkey Tom.
It's a fucking mess. Even people who seem to be fans of Trisha have had a hard time understanding what the fuck her point is, or if there was any real point in the first place. She seems to have spuriously had an issue with her limited involvement in the production when prior, she just wanted to be lazy on a consistent basis. And now, everything just has to change around her. Where there was a legitimate point made about wanting involvement in the production, it was quickly squashed by her blowing it out of proportion. And now, her personal ties with Ethan and Hila are severed. At first, I was under the impression that, hey, this is a conflict, but much like the first time Trisha quit the podcast, she would come back. Amends would be made. It would be resolved. Now, I think it's completely over. Trisha called Ethan a manipulator, a liar. She said that he was bringing up her sexual assault as a way to harass her. Her brain is mush, and reasoning with her at this point is just not worth the time. Although I'd imagine things will be awkward going forward, as Hila's brother is engaged to Trisha right now. So, yeah. What can we learn from all of this happening? Probably don't employ someone like Trisha to be on your podcast if you don't want to eventually deal with their implosions, where they try to suck everything into their black hole and ruin it all. I would never want to be in a business relationship with someone like her. For now, the Frenemies fanbase is left without one of the most popular podcasts in the world, and the YouTube community has been left without an hour of free entertainment every week. Ethan has announced that his mom will be doing a podcast with him now, so there's that. Whether the H3 show itself will continue to be a popular force in the space, or in a post-Trisha era, they start to lose their audience, is unknown. That being said, Ethan hasn't had a hard time getting into drama since then, which has gotten his show in the news. So I think for the time being, he'll be just fine. Trisha will go back to, Thanks for watching. I've been Turkey Tom, and until next time, leave me alone.